Where does Denver Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson rank amongst other quarterbacks inside the AFC West division? Guys like Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and Derek Carr. And what are the unique storylines that accompany each potential prospective matchup that we'll see this season when those teams and these quarterbacks face off? You get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a Monday episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Here the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, senior Broncos analyst at Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Both of us cover the Broncos for the Locked On Network and I News Broncos Country. Thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format, not to mention watching on YouTube as well, youtube.com/LockedOnBroncos. Make sure you hit that subscribe or that follow button if you have not done so already. Sayre, my friend, we're getting into the important time of the offseason. OTAs are still ongoing right now. We're approaching mandatory minicamp in just about a week's time. And then after that, the players are off for 5 total weeks before reporting back to the UCL Training Center for the start of training camp. I'll be there at training camp. Very excited about that. It's going to amplify, I think, more coverage that we have here on Locked On Broncos. But, man, there's a lot of really good evergreen pieces that we can touch on along the way. So let's take a look at ranking the Broncos quarterback, Russell Wilson, with other quarterbacks in the AFC West. Let's start off with Russell Wilson and Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, man. Does that mean we got to say nice things about these other guys, Cody? I don't know. Can we do that? Are we allowed to do that in this forum? No.
Yes.
We are. In all seriousness, I really like Derek Carr. And this is the only time, if a Raiders fan stumbled upon this, Cody, this is the only time they're ever going to hear me say this kind of thing. So I really like Derek Carr. I think he's a really good dude. He has been, in my opinion, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL over the last handful of years. And frankly, one of the most disrespected. Basically, since and even right before John Gruden became the head coach of the Raiders, weren't there trade rumors every single year about Derek Carr? There's people trying to cut him, people trying to trade him. And I honestly was hoping that the Raiders would do it because I want him out of here, because it seems like over the last couple of years, he has been the biggest thorn in the Denver Broncos side. We talk a lot about the losing streak the Broncos are on against the Kansas City Chiefs, but how about the whooping that Derek Carr has been putting on the Denver Broncos since that 2015 Super Bowl season? The Broncos haven't won in Oakland or Vegas since that year, which is kind of crazy to think about. I mean, the streak against the Chiefs has lasted that long. Everybody talks about it. Nobody talks about the Broncos' road woes against the Raiders, and that has very little, in my opinion, with all due respect, has very little to do with their defense, has very little to do with their coach, has very little to do with anything else besides Derek Carr simply going out and beating the Denver Broncos. So me personally, I'm a big fan of Derek Carr's game. I feel like I can be even more respectful towards him now that the Broncos have a quarterback that we can actually see. He can go toe to toe out on the field with them. But I just think his game is very underrated. And I just feel like he does a great job, like we're going to talk about, of maximizing the talent around him.
Well, I think there's always an argument, as we talk about these AFC West opponents that the Broncos will face, like for us, it's our job to talk about the good and the bad, right? To look at both sides of everything for the Broncos, for the teams that they play. And you know what? I think you have to give credit where credit is due. The AFC West is a very, very good quarterback-riddled division. Like there are so many guys that can contribute. And Derek Carr wasn't far too off of a potential MVP season. Then he broke his leg and unfortunately impacted the Raiders as they made the playoffs for the first time in their in a long time for them. And unfortunately, they lost to Brock Osweiler, former Bronco thing. But one thing I want to look at here, I think one thing where we can say Russell Wilson has the advantage for here against Derek Carr, I just think his experience and his achievements so far have been greater than what Derek Carr has. But Derek Carr, as you mentioned, he has carved up the Broncos, whether they play man coverage, whether they play zone coverage. He has always had a high completion percentage against him, and he's just always found ways to tear things apart, especially with different receivers. Now you add in a guy like Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, and now Devontae Adams in this wide receiving group. Sayre, it is going to be brutal. I mean, that's a lot of tough options for the Broncos secondary to have to cover. So the Broncos going to have to find a way to get pressure after Carr. But let's talk about it right here. I think when we look at the AFC West in general, and obviously we are open to any kind of discussion from any fan, whether you're a Chiefs fan, Chargers fan, Broncos fan, Raiders fan, or an NFL fan of another team. Make sure you comment in here. But I think that you can make a legitimate argument that between the Broncos and the Raiders inside the AFC West, these two teams have the best overall wide receiving core in the NFL. I think you can also make an argument for the Chiefs there, but I think when we talk about guys who have top end talent and maybe potential production, I think that the Raiders and the Broncos probably have the deeper units between all the teams inside the AFC West. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
I completely agree with you. And I actually think that the Raiders have the best wide receiver core in the entire NFL, just on paper at the very least, and that did take a little bit of a shot when they traded away Brian Edwards, right, to the Atlanta Falcons. But still, you've got Hunter Renfrow, you've got Devontae Adams, and you've got Darren Waller, who's essentially just another receiver for them. I know that, not to disrespect his ability to play in line when he's asked to do that, but I think Foster Moreau is kind of more that guy for them. But really the pressure is on Derek Carr to become a distributing point guard this year. And he really has to take his game to the next level. Like, it's one thing for him to have these stretches of play. Like, there was that period where nobody was beating the Kansas City Chiefs. Then all of a sudden, Derek Carr and the Raiders go in and beat them and get it done. And they're the one team that gets it done. And everybody's like buying the Raiders and they're hyped for, I think that was just last season, if memory serves me right, or 2 seasons ago. And then all of a sudden they just completely fell off the wagon. So Derek Carr has to be more consistent, but now he has a better fail safe before him. He has Hunter Renfrow, who's grown into one of the best slot receivers in the game. And I feel like entering a contract year, I feel like Hunter Renfrow is going to have his biggest season yet. Devontae Adams obviously just got a lot of money from the Raiders. So they're going to be well set at that position and relatively deep as well. They've got some depth at that skill position. So I think that Derek Carr, the pressure is really on for him. The question is between, if we're comparing Derek Carr to Russell Wilson, who best maximizes their group, Cody? Because I pulled up a list of the leading receivers all time in Seattle Seahawks history. And among this list are guys like Jermaine Kearse and other players like, Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, guys that have come from relative obscurity at the collegiate level to become superstars in Seattle with Russell Wilson throwing them passes.
I personally believe, based on just watching Russell Wilson since 2012, I think you make a great point. You mentioned Doug Baldwin, who, man, has been such an underrated player. I know he was one of Russ's favorite targets in his playing days. Man, when he was at his peak in Seattle, Doug Baldwin was one of the best guys out there, one of the best route runners in the NFL at the time there. I think Russell Wilson has the advantage here. And I don't know if you agree, if you disagree with me, but I feel like when it comes to elevating the wide receivers around him, I mean, we've already seen the tangible on-field product at OTAs, at practice with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Travis Fulgham, Tim Patrick. In terms of the receiving game and what Russell Wilson demands, these guys already have the chemistry between each other down pat. Now, I know that the bigger question will be, come regular season, can we see that pay off with results? And I think that for the Broncos, barring something unforeseen, I think absolutely. I think that Russell Wilson has the advantage here over Derek Carr, but let's not try to discount Derek Carr. Derek Carr does make his players better too. He understands where to go, and his chemistry that he has with Renfrow, the chemistry he has with Darren Waller, and I'm sure because of the fact that they were college teammates, the chemistry between Devontae Adams and Carr will accelerate this upcoming season. I think that also helps to say that he has a case to also elevate guys, but I'm going to take Russ in this situation.
I'm taking Russ as well, honestly, Cody. You just look back at what he's done with the Seattle Seahawks. I feel like definitely he has been an MVP caliber player over the better part of the last decade, mainly because he does things like this. Yeah, it's not that, well, you can just insert any wide receiver into Seattle's system and they become great, but there's been a lot of guys throughout the years that we've talked about that just, even David Moore, a player that was with the Denver Broncos last year, he became kind of famous with Russell Wilson throwing him the ball. So I feel like this is definitely an area where Russell Wilson has a clear advantage over guys even like Derek Carr, who's a very good ball distributor, but also even some of these other quarterbacks in the AFC West, just in terms of specifically speaking on getting the ball to your targets and maximizing the talent around you. Russell Wilson is a proven MVP caliber player in that regard.
On Broncos Country, Raiders Nation, we are eager for your thoughts down below. We love objective, open-minded conversation. So tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Lockdown Broncos, or on the YouTube comment section. Comment your thoughts on Russell Wilson as it compares to Derek Carr. But coming up here in just a moment, Russell Wilson, how does he match up with Justin Herbert? One is a superstar. One is a rising superstar. Where will they meet in the middle of this upcoming season? We get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about Blue Nile, the sponsor of today's episode of the show. And whether you're ready to pop the question or if you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com, and you can make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners, they get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. And this podcast exclusive includes engagement. So use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, it ships free, and it arrives in discreet packaging right at your doorstep that won't give away what's inside. You can shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. And our good friends over there, RockAuto.com. If you need anything for your vehicle, RockAuto.com has everything that you could be looking for. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, RockAuto.com has everything from taillights, new engines, new motor oil, or even brand new carpets for your vehicle today. And the thing I love the most about RockAuto.com, if I'm trying to find something specifically for my vehicle, I just go to their website, RockAuto.com. I go to the search tab, and I can search for all the parts available for my car based on year, make, model, brand specifications, and even the prices that I prefer to give me the best overall value at rockauto.com. I never have to pay full price as I would at a local chain auto parts store or a car dealership when I have rockauto.com, where the price is always reliably low for whether, like I said, you're a professional or whether you're a do-it-yourself. So go to rockauto.com here today to see all the parts available for your car or your truck, right? Lockdown Broncos in there. How did you hear about his box? So that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, Sarah, continuing on our conversation on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos ranking, where Russell Wilson projects amongst AFC West quarterbacks inside of the AFC West. Broncos Country, thank you for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much for that. Let's talk about Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert. Look, I'll be on the record of saying this. I grew up as an Oregon Ducks fan. So for me, watching Justin Herbert in high school, watching him also at the University of Oregon, I'm a big Justin Herbert fan. Not to mention, I got to sit down and talk with him this past summer, which was a really, really cool experience there. A great dude. Had a lot of great things to say about Denver, regardless of whether you believe it or not. He did. But outside of that, you know, the AFC West dynamic has now changed, Sarah. And I think for the Broncos, the most success they've had in the AFC West has really been splitting games with the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Russell Wilson, I think with his addition, gives them the ability to potentially sweep the Chargers at some point. But on the other hand, they have a rising superstar in Justin Herbert who has the same opportunity to sweep the Broncos or to split games with the Broncos. It is an elevated division. Justin Herbert, as I mentioned, is a rising superstar, will be one, is on course for it. Russell Wilson is a superstar. That's where I feel like Denver has the advantage here. But the Chargers aren't too far back.
They're really not. And you see that just a lot of people every year love to talk about the Chargers, which is not abnormal. But I think at the same time, it's a different level of hype now. I mean, it's Justin Herbert has proven he is one of the elite young quarterbacks in this game. I mean, you talk about physical traits, you talk about intangibles. I mean, if you can sit down and talk to him, Cody, and come away thinking, man, that's a good dude right there, he must be a good dude, because there's no way Justin Herbert has all these, he has everything that you look for at the position in an alternate universe. Could he have been a Denver Bronco? I feel like that's a story that people don't really talk about that much. But he was the apple of John Elway's eye once upon a time. And then he decided to go back to school for another year, which I think threw everything off, threw the whole plan off course. But here, you know, we've landed right here today with Russell Wilson in orange and blue. So I think everybody's happy with where they're at right now. But the Chargers have to feel good about where they're at with Justin Herbert, because, I mean, he's got one of the freakiest arms in the league. Obviously, just an amazing athlete. Just to watch him out there, the things that he's able to do throwing on the run, like you said, a lot of similar things about Russell and Justin Herbert in terms of their play style, being able to just absolutely kill a defense on the move.
Well, and I think for one element that we saw with Justin Herbert last year, specifically against Denver, like he can take over with his legs. Like he is an athlete. He can get to the outside. He can carry the football and convert. And one thing that he absolutely hurt Denver on last season, just going back and watching film, especially with Mike Williams, he hurt them on 3rd and long. I mean, Denver had so many 3rd and long situations defensively, which was like, hey, for first down, second down, the Broncos defense did really good, but there were some times where Justin Herbert and the Chargers bit the Broncos on 3rd and long, and that's going to have to be something they have to counteract this season. But when we talk about having similar play styles, I look at Russell Wilson. I look at Justin Herbert. Both quarterbacks are very good throwing on the run, being mobile. We're going to see a lot of that from both these teams, but they can also kill you from standing inside the pocket as well. Like they can throw the ball downfield. Herbert's got a big time arm. Russell Wilson has a big time arm. So I think that you can maybe, I don't know, can you maybe make the comparison that maybe Russell Wilson, when he was a little younger in the NFL, when he first came into the NFL, didn't have the numbers that Justin Herbert had in his first 2 seasons. However, I think from a play style, they kind of remind me a lot of each other in many, many ways. And we talk about leadership. Justin Herbert has it. Russell Wilson has that leadership as well. I mean, should Broncos fans, Sayre, in your opinion, should Broncos fans be more excited about when the Broncos take on the Chargers versus any, to see Russ dueling against Herbert versus him dueling against Carr or Mahomes?
That's another great question to think about is who do you really want to face in this division? I don't know that
Nobody.
there is I know there's not really a great preference here. I just feel like you look at Justin Herbert, does he have a little bit more of the gunslinger type in him where Patrick Mahomes has that as well? Derek Carr is really less of a risk taker. So maybe against a team like the Chargers and Justin Herbert, you're more likely to get into a shootout than you are against the Raiders. So you might be able to do a little more ball control because Justin Herbert, we saw in that game against the Raiders at the end of last season. You want to get into a dogfight with the Chargers, you go right ahead because they're absolutely going to come back and come at you. Justin Herbert basically willed that team down the field on those last couple of drives in regulation. It was actually amazing to watch. I can't remember the exact number of 4th down plays
There was
that he
4
helped them
on
convert.
that
It was
last
4 of
drive.
them.
And they were
I
they
mean,
were like 4th and short. They were a lot of them
no,
were like 4th and 10.
it was amazing. And that's exactly what he's capable of doing. He's capable of putting a team on his back. That's what scares me the most is when you're talking about guys in this division that you really feel, hey, if the time comes where they're down by, 17 points with like 9 minutes to play, you're not safe against Justin Herbert by any means. And that's why I would maybe prefer to play against a guy like Derek Carr versus Justin Herbert, because I trust the defense against a guy like Carr, maybe not pushing the ball vertically as much. Whereas Justin Herbert, I mean, he's going to get you back into the game with one sling of the arm, and he can do that at any point in time. So would I take him over Russell Wilson as a long-term option? I would say I don't know that anybody in NFL circles right now would say, oh yeah, I'd take Russell Wilson for the next 5 to 10 years over Justin Herbert. I think if you're building a team, Justin Herbert is exactly the type of guy that you would want to build your team around, and he's just that type of playmaker at the position, a rare playmaker who has, like you said, the ability to beat you with his legs. He can obviously beat you with his arm, but he's also just growing into, remember the concerns with him coming out of Oregon. A lot of people question his leadership. A lot of people question, what's this guy like in the locker room? Is he too quiet? I think he's quieted a lot of those concerns.
No, he certainly has it. And I like the point that you made. Like for me right now, if I'm looking at a short-term window versus long-term, if I had to build a team with a long-term vision and a chance to get to multiple Super Bowls, maybe with a team around him, I would say Justin Herbert's point, right? Because we, as we know, Russell Wilson wants to play for the next 10 years. Will he? Right? That is a huge question. We know Justin Herbert, barring something very unforeseen, will probably play for the next 15 to 17 years of his career. He still has a long ways to go. But if I'm talking about trying to win a Super Bowl in a 3-year window, I feel like right now Russell Wilson gives the Denver Broncos the best chance. And I think that the Chargers are going to be a very good team and one that Broncos country definitely shouldn't sleep on. I'm excited to see the matchups. I know we're looking forward to our crossovers this upcoming season with the Locked On Chargers guys, but at the end of the day, we got to get to the main event, and that's coming up here in just a moment. We're going to talk about Russell Wilson versus Patrick Mahomes. How does Russ have the advantage over Mahomes, and can he finally lead them to snap the 13-game win streak that the Chiefs have against the Denver Broncos? We dive into that coming up here in just a moment, but before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information, and you can find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, and Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing, all in in one place. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. As we dive into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Once again, Broncos Country, thank you so much for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day. Sayre, it is time for the main event as we're talking about where Russell Wilson ranks amongst AFC West quarterbacks inside the division here. We've had some great conversations about Russ and Derek Carr, Russ and Justin Herbert, but this is one that everyone in Broncos Country wants to know a lot more about. Russell Wilson versus Patrick Mahomes. Now, I will start this off by saying, Russell Wilson has beaten Patrick Mahomes once already. Now, can he do it in Denver and end the 13-game losing streak? Well, that's certainly possible. I think Russell Wilson gives the Broncos the absolute best chance that they've had to beat the Chiefs from an offensive standpoint since 2015. I mean, maybe you can make the argument 2018 with Case Keenum if he doesn't overshoot DT on the cover 2 fade. That's probably the best chance that the Broncos had at one point offensively. Outside of that, Russell Wilson definitely brings that package to Denver.
He does. That's going to be a turning point of this season. If the Broncos can end up beating the Kansas City Chiefs, remember they play each other twice, basically back to back. It's within the same month at the end of the season. So there's definitely going to be, I think, a point where Russell Wilson is going to be looked to as the guy to galvanize this team and really get them over that proverbial hump, right? That's the one thing right now that I think is holding this team back from maybe even believing in itself as a Super Bowl contender. Like, can you actually beat the Kansas City Chiefs? And if you can't beat the Chiefs, what can you do in the playoffs? And specifically, you've got to go out and you've got to beat Patrick Mahomes. And we know it takes a lot more than just great quarterback play to beat Patrick Mahomes. You got to have obviously some big defensive plays. You got to create turnovers and you got to have some luck. Look how hard it was for the Cincinnati Bengals just to beat the Chiefs in the play. I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals maybe never played a better game all year long, and it still took them to overtime within an inch of their lives to beat him. So Patrick Mahomes is just that guy. I mean, he is impossible to go up against and say, oh yeah, I would take Russell Wilson over Mahomes. When we're talking about, like we talked about with Herbert, like, would you build a team around this guy? But when we're talking about head to head, Cody, you already mentioned Russell Wilson beat Patrick Mahomes once. I do feel like he's going to be the guy to help the Broncos beat Mahomes really for the first time ever, right? I mean, they've never beaten him. So I think he's going to be the guy to help them do that.
Well, and, for Mahomes, his ascension in the NFL has really frustrated the entire NFL. I mean, we've seen a lot of teams try to make moves to counteract what the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes have been able to do. And Mahomes is a great quarterback, and he's certainly been on a very historic rise and will probably continue to be on it. As long as he continues to have the playmakers around him, he does a great job in elevating. And when we talk about a guy who can really, I think, elevate any wide receiver on his team, I think Russell Wilson, and I really do think that Patrick Mahomes is there at the top. I think those two guys are almost neck and neck, and maybe how they elevate the guys on their team, the playmakers in those positions, because they've overcome injuries at the wide receiver position themselves. And now I think a big storyline is going to be, how do they manage without Tyreek Hill? And I still think that Mahomes is still going to lead a very electrifying offense this season, regardless of the loss of Tyreek Hill. They still have a lot of guys. They added value with Sky Moore in the NFL draft. They have a bunch of dudes. Obviously, you talk about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. You have Juju Smith-Schuster alongside McCole Hardman. They're loaded. They're going to be okay, in my opinion. But I think the Broncos potentially can match up well. And if the Broncos can find a way to beat the Kansas City Chiefs here once again, I think it gives the Broncos all the momentum that they need potentially, especially as you mentioned, late in the season, to maybe put themselves in a position for the playoffs this year and potentially the AFC West division title. But another interesting note about these two quarterbacks, Sayre, is that Russell Wilson won a Super Bowl in his second season in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes won a Super Bowl technically in his second season as a starter in the NFL. Granted, his rookie season, he played behind Alex Smith. These guys are very, very similar, but these, in my opinion, are the two top dogs inside the AFC West, I think, from experience and also trajectory and maybe impact to their team.
I would completely agree with that. I think we're probably spot on with the 1 through 4 as far as AFC West quarterbacks rank. So we didn't exactly rank as we go along, but I think if you're listening along, you can kind of pick up.
Yeah.
We would probably go Mahomes number 1, Russell Wilson number 2, until he's dethroned. Exactly. And then obviously Herbert and Derek Carr. But at the same time, Cody, I've put together a number of lists of quarterbacks this year. I think all 4 of those quarterbacks are top 10 in the NFL. I know that might be a hot take with Derek Carr, But I think with Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes, you have two very interesting guys that they were kind of doubted coming out of college, weren't they? For Russell Wilson, it was, well, he's too small. Guys that are under 6 foot or 6 foot tall, they just don't play the quarterback position at a high level in the NFL. And that's obviously been debunked. And then with Patrick Mahomes, it was like, well, you can't take Texas Tech quarterbacks in the first round of the draft because we know that Texas Tech is just, college inflated numbers, blah, blah, blah. I think if you evaluated these guys individually and just watch them play, you could see these two guys are absolute ballers. And that's what I think they bring to the table more than anybody else in this division. Like, yes, Justin Herbert is an absolute gamer, but I think when you watch Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes play, there's a different level of, like, and I hate to even say this, but I'm going to say it, the it factor, right? When you have a guy that guy has the ball in their hands, you trust them to take your team down the field. You trust them to get you with 13 seconds left in position for a game tying field goal to take it to overtime in, against Buffalo. And I think that's exactly what these two guys bring to the table. Is they have the it factor. They are clutch. They've overcome expectations. They've solidified themselves as the elite of the elite, and they've gotten it done at the highest level at a very young age. So they bring that intangible with them that nobody else in this division can claim.
It's going to be a while. The AFC in general is loaded from top to bottom with quarterbacks, with very good teams. And for the Broncos and these teams that we mentioned in the AFC West, the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Chiefs, with Mahomes, Carr, and Justin Herbert, I tell you what, Sayre, it's going to be exciting. Like, this is good football. This is a good problem for the NFL to have. And obviously, as we see the AFC West have the most nationally televised games out of all the divisions of football, it obviously means something about the state of the quarterback play and the rosters and expectations for these teams. So, Broncos Country, let us know what your rankings are for the quarterbacks inside the AFC West. Where does Russell Wilson rank, in your opinion, with Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and Derek Carr? Drop them in the YouTube comment section or tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Lockdown Broncos. Broncos Country, that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. After this show, make sure you go check out the Locked On Avalanche podcast hosted by Chris Maselli and Kyle Sullivan. The Avs are up 3-0. Can they sweep Edmonton? That is a huge storyline. Plus, who steps up in Kadri's absence as he'll be out for the remainder of the Western Conference Finals? Check out the Locked On Avalanche podcast for more. But Broncos Country, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the show. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we're back tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show. The Broncos continue with OTAs today, and they also continue with OTAs on Tuesday. We have you covered all week long here, Locked On Broncos podcast.